Seems like anytime I review a watch on the channel that's over 40 millimeters in size, I get a lot of comments from people saying that's too big. The trend is smaller watches. Big watches are kind of ridiculous. It's not going to fit someone with a smaller wrist. And if that's you, today's watch is probably not going to be for you. Because today we're taking a look at an unapologetically very large 45 millimeter diameter dive watch. And that in itself is nothing particularly special. There's tons of oversized watches that you can get your hand on that are pretty cheap and not that great. So the real question here is, did Boldr actually make a good large watch? Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch, your budget watch collecting channel. And today I'm finally getting to take a look at another watch from Boldr. This is actually the second time I've gotten to do a review of one of Boldr's watches. The first time was way back at the beginning of my channel. Comment down below if you happen to know the name of the model that I reviewed last time. If so, you've probably been watching me for a very long time. But if you name your company Boldr, it makes sense to go for a big, bold watch from time to time. And I think that's kind of what Boldr's doing here. The Boldr Odyssey 45mm is a beast of a watch. It's a 45mm diameter watch that is 16mm tall and 53mm lug to lug. And on the bracelet, they didn't even go with female end links. They put male links on there, which effectively makes the watch 59mm in length. This is a watch that has 500 meters of water resistance with a helium escape valve. Boldr pretty much went all out with this. Sapphire crystal, absolutely insane lume for BGW9, including a fully lume bezel with a sapphire insert, and inside you're getting Miyota's high-end 9015 automatic movement. So this watch is definitely not a toy. This thing is built like a tank. It seems like it can handle anything, and it is one of the most heavy and substantial watches that I've ever worn. It's going to have a ton of wrist presence, and you're definitely going to feel it on the wrist. This is one of Boldr's more expensive watches at $650 retail price, and it definitely looks and feels like a $650 watch. Now, Boldr sent me this watch in on loan. I will be sending it back to them after this review is done. Now, Boldr is a micro brand that's been around for a few years now, so they've been able to build a little bit of a reputation and kind of along the way really start to develop their own sort of brand identity, and I think that identity really is something that is recognizable in their watches. I really love to see a micro brand come out with a style of watch that is unique, that is kind of their own, that makes it recognizable. If you look at almost any of Boldr's watches, you can kind of get the feel that, yeah, this is a Boldr watch. Their design language is very modern, often very angular, and that's definitely true in this piece. This watch is all brushed, it's all angles, there's hardly any curves at all on it. Kind of gives off the feel of like a DeLorean or a Tesla Cybertruck or something like that. So kind of hyper modern, almost futuristic case design. But then they do bring in some curves into the bezel shape and then that nice domed sapphire crystal. It's a very interesting and well executed design, and even though the case is all brushed, because of all of those different facets and angles, they catch the light in kind of unique ways, and it really does have a lot of life on the wrist. Now they have this in a couple of different colorways, and I asked to take a look at the silver dial version, which has a very metallic look to it. And I really like what they've done with the dial design on here. So they have two finishes on it. In the center you have this circular area that has this kind of rough texture to it, but it's not that sand kind of texture that you see very commonly on watches these days. If you look really close, it has this kind of like almost molten metal kind of look to it. I think it's very well done, and I really like that it is, again, different from that kind of sand texture that you're starting to see very commonly used in a lot of watches. And then around that you have a big brushed circular ring, and that's where the indexes are housed. At 6 o'clock you've got a color matched date wheel, so that's really cool to see that kind of gray date wheel that really blends perfectly into the dial. I love the 6 o'clock placement of the date as well. For the indexes, you're getting rectangular batons all the way around with a double baton at 12 o'clock to help you orient the watch easily in the dark. And you will be able to see this watch easily in the dark. This is probably the brightest application of BGW9 that I have seen on a watch that I've reviewed. So BGW9 is, I think, kind of the cool lume. It's not the brightest. You know, C3 is typically the brightest, but C3 has sort of a greenish tint to it in the light, and then it glows a bright gray in the dark. Whereas BGW9, you get a very pure white look to the paint when it's in the light, and then you get this kind of really cool blue glow in the dark. Often the trade-off for that is, again, it's not quite as bright as the green glowing Lume paint. But in this case, they've applied it in such a way that it really holds its own against almost any other watch out there. In fact, I included this watch in my Ultimate Lume Challenge, which was my last video. You can go back and check that out if you want to see how it scored. In that last video, I introduced a new scoring system for Lume called the J score, and this one gets a 12 on that system, meaning that it's significantly brighter than my Seiko Samurai dive watch, and it even tied the new SWC Mark II diver that I tried out as well. So really excellent Lume on this watch. But when you're looking at a watch this size, probably the biggest concern you're going to have is the wearing experience of the watch. Now, I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and I feel like the size fits pretty well for my wrist. This is definitely larger than I typically go, but proportionally I think it works, and even with that extended lugs on the male end links, it's still wrapped around my wrist pretty well. And on the bracelet, when sized up, it feels pretty well balanced. So the bracelet is also a fairly large, heavy bracelet, which helps to balance the watch head on your wrist. The bracelet also has 6 micro adjusts and screw links, so you should be able to get it down to a pretty perfect size for your wrist, which is, again, really important when you've got a watch this size. It didn't really slide around or roll around my wrist too much, even though it did still feel a little bit top heavy. But overall, I was surprised at the comfort, but it is heavy. It's something that I definitely noticed. It was on the wrist. I could feel it all the time. But that's kind of what you're getting with this watch. This is not the watch that you want to wear, with long sleeves that are going to be kind of getting in the way. It's going to be a great watch for the summer and for short sleeves. But I think this watch is really getting into kind of that statement piece territory. It's something that people will definitely notice. And that's really, I think, one of the fun things about watches of this size. That's one of the reasons why people like them. And this watch really is a looker. Thankfully, it is not just all style. It is a very well-built watch. As mentioned, the bracelet is very solid. That includes the clasp and the locking mechanism there. Everything was very smooth. When I first got it, the clasp did take a little while to loosen up. I felt like the pushers weren't quite engaging right, but after about a week or so on the wrist, it's pretty well locked in now. The bezel action is really satisfying, very easy to turn, and you get a nice grip on that large bezel with all the kind of finger grooves and curves in there. Really great sound to it, pretty good alignment as well. Likewise, the crown is very easy to operate. It feels very solid. There's very clearly defined positions between the winding, date setting, and time setting positions. And cycling through those doesn't cause the hands to jump around. So definitely a very quality feeling watch. And you would hope to get that with a watch in this price range. At $650, that's a substantial amount to spend on a micro brand diver. So let's wrap all this up by talking about that price and what you're getting for that. I do think for all that they're offering you, $650 is a pretty fair price for that. The things that are particularly unique about this watch, that 500 meters of water resistance with the helium escape valve, those are technically impressive features, even though they're the kinds of things that pretty much nobody would use. At least not 99% of the people who are going to buy this watch. But it is a technical feat to build a watch that solid. The lume is outstanding, particularly if you like BGW9 lume. If you like that blue glow lume, this is an excellent piece to get for that. The design is unique. It's not an homage. It doesn't draw its inspiration from vintage pieces. It's something new. It's something fresh. And yet it comes together very well. It's not like this sort of gaudy, crazy kind of thing. It's a very smooth, very modern, very sleek looking watch. And it has a lot of great details with the different textures and the shapes and things that they got going on with it. As far as negatives go, so that clasp taking a little while to break in was a little bit disconcerting at first. Would have been nice if right out of the box if it functioned flawlessly, but again, now it's functioning pretty much flawlessly. Really, the main concerns that people are going to have is the wearability of this watch and whether you're going to be able to wear it on your wrist. It's really going to come down to, do you like a large watch? If you want something small and comfortable, something that's going to disappear, something that you're not going to notice, this is definitely not it. But if you want a really heavy, well-built watch, if you want something big that's going to be very visible and give you a lot of wrist presence, this watch is definitely going to give it to you. I mean, you have this watch on the wrist and yeah, you feel like you're ready to take on anything. So are you a big watch kind of guy? Drop me a comment down below and let me know. It's interesting because again, it feels like, the market trend for the watch world is going towards smaller, and yet I still see companies coming out with these large watches, and so I know there must still be a general market for that. I don't know if it's just like all the YouTube guys are gravitating towards the smaller watches and the general public is still into larger ones, but I know there's some of you guys out there that are into large watches. I get your comments from time to time, so hopefully this is the kind of thing you guys will find interesting. It's definitely a lot of fun for me to take a look at it, and really cool to see something new and fresh from Boldr here. Anyways, that's gonna wrap up the review for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.